So a website I like to use during the entire season to look up stats for the Portland Trail Blazers is Dunks and Threes. And on this website, I look up a bunch of things regarding like assist rate, turnover rate, adjusted offensive and defensive rating, and etc. And in this video, I'm going to go through stats on the site and go through different analytics for the Portland Trail Blazers because I think it helps paint a picture of how they played as a whole this season. And I can also compare them to other tanking teams and see how much worse or better they were in some certain metrics to teams that were in a similar situation that they were in this season. Let's start off with adjusted offensive and defensive rating. That is basically like your normal offensive and defensive rating, except it's adjusted for strength of schedule. And offensive rating is how many points you score in 100 possessions, and defensive rating is how many points you give up in 100 possessions. The Blazers offensively were terrible this year, second to last in adjusted offensive rating, 108.3, very, very brutal. They were more than a full point behind the Detroit Pistons, and defense was a bit better. It was 23rd, which is higher than the Blazers were the past few years. The Blazers have been awful in terms of adjusted defensive rating over previous seasons, so at least there's a little bit of improvement, but still being 23rd or worse in both categories is not good, right? That's why they're one of the worst teams in the league this past season. And funny enough, the adjusted part of these stats actually makes them look a little bit better because Dunks and Threes has Portland as having the toughest schedule in the entire league this past season. Now here's something I want to get into. Pace. The Portland Trail Blazers had the 21st fastest pace this season, and I have a major issue with that. They were extremely young. Before the season, there was a whiteboard in training camp where Chauncey Billups listed a core principle as playing fast. And the Blazers really, really struggled to play fast this season. They did not get out in transition enough. And going back and watching individual players, there was multiple guys that I thought were impressive when they actually did get out and run. Toumani Camara was impressive as a lane filler and could even handle the ball in the open court a little bit. Shane Sharp played with really good pace and transition. And of course, as a lane filler, he's an insane lob target for a wing. Scoot, of course, sometimes he would get out of control, but he had some of his best moments in the open court. And then Anthony Simons filling in on the wing as a shooter, got some of his best three-point looks in transition. I just don't understand why the Blazers did not get out and run more because they were built to run. DeAndre Ayton is a rim running big as well. Uprise can run the floor. This team was built to run and they didn't. And it was very, very frustrating. And if you want to look at fast break points, TeamRankings.com has Portland at 23rd there. The number one team was the Toronto Raptors, a similarly tanking team as the Blazers. So pace was a problem this year. It was one of the things that I thought this team would start doing. I thought they'd start playing faster, and they completely failed to do so. Now let's look at what Dunks and Threes calls the four factors. That is effective field goal percentage, which is basically field goal percentage, but rewarding threes a little bit more. And Portland ranked dead last there, 30th. And then turnover percentage, right? The percent of possessions that end in a turnover, the Blazers had the second highest turnover percentage in the league. They did not take care of the ball. Now, this is a stat that is normally going to plague young rebuilding teams. If you sort it, you'll see that the bottom five teams are all lottery teams. The Spurs, the Grizzlies, the Pistons, the Blazers, and the Utah Jazz. So not a surprise there when you got Scoot Henderson running the show as well. He was turnover prone this year, a lot of young guys. But it didn't have to be so bad. You had the Hornets at 20th, the Raptors at 21st. Like, you had some lottery teams that were a bit better. So even though the Blazers were tanking, second highest turnover rate in the league offensively is a problem and something that they need to improve because it's kind of unacceptable. And then offensive rebounding was the one thing the Blazers did well. If you're going to miss a bunch of shots, I mean, you might as well try and get a lot of offensive rebounds. And the Blazers were the third best offensive rebounding team in the league. And then free throw rate, they were 23rd in terms of their ability to get to the free throw line. No surprise there. Let's look at defense for these four factors as well. The Blazers gave up the 24th worst effective field goal percentage. Turnover percentage, that's the one thing they did, is they turned over teams at the 6th highest rate in the entire league. Now, this stat was at the very top of the league early in the season. It kind of trailed off as the season went along. The Blazers were really good at forcing turnovers earlier in the season, which makes their lack of pace and transition play even more baffling to me, because they were turning teams over. It wasn't like they were grinding out defensive possessions to the point where they weren't getting turnovers and fast break opportunities off of steals or stuff like that. They were forcing a lot of turnovers and still not running. Defensive rebounding was a major problem for the Blazers. Their opponents had the 4th highest offensive rebounding percentage, which means the Blazers basically had the 4th lowest defensive rebounding percentage. It was not good for the Blazers on the defensive glass like it was the offensive glass. And then the Blazers also fouled a ton, which is another thing that you'll see from young teams. 27th ranked in the league there. So defensive discipline just needs to improve. Basically, they need to box out more. That was a major issue this year. And they need to stop fouling so much. If they can do that, then maybe they can get into the top 20 in adjusted defensive rating. Now let's look at offensive shooting, and this should be fun. Yeah, the Blazers were absolutely terrible. The Blazers finished second to last in terms of their percentage at the rim, and they almost finished last. The Grizzlies barely beat them out. The Blazers were far away. The Blazers weren't even close to the 28th ranked team here, which was the Atlanta Hawks. And then the Blazers were dead last in mid-range percentage and three-point percentage. So basically, the team can't shoot. And they also can't finish at the rim. Like, these are horrible, horrible efficiency numbers. They're lucky they weren't dead last in all 3 areas. Now, what's funny is there was a team last year with the same exact profile. It was the Houston Rockets. They were 29th in rim percentage and 30th in mid-range and three-point percentage. And this year, the Rockets were noticeably better from the mid-range, and we're a bit better from both the rim and 3, so we can only hope for the same improvement from the Blazers next season. Now, the Blazers did shoot the 11th highest amount of shots at the rim. It's kind of crazy that they didn't get to the free throw line more because of that. Hold up. Since we're talking about numbers, let's talk about numbers that could make you money. This year's NBA playoffs have been phenomenal, and if you haven't been getting in on the action with BetUS, you've been missing out. As a Blazer fan, it's probably been years since you've been emotionally invested in a game. So why not give yourself some emotional attachment to an actual basketball game? And with BetUS, it can be in a fun way. Instead of, man, we lost 61 games this year, but that's a good thing. Yay. You can get in on individual game lines over at BetUS.com. For Monday's slate of games, the Celtics are a 10-point road favorite, the Thunder are a 5-point road favorite, and the Nuggets are a 7-point home favorite. I'm going with Miami, OKC, and the Lakers. And you can too, although even though I got action on the Lakers, I would never, ever root for them. And you can also get in on series prices. This money line says that the Lakers are plus 1,800 to complete a historic 3-0 comeback. The more competitive series lines, though, are the Magic at plus 150. They tied up the series 2-2 after falling down 2-0, and they were plus 700 a few days ago. If you got in on that action, you could be sitting pretty. But before you get in on any of this action, BetUS is offering you a great deal. They're offering you a 125% bonus on your first 3 deposits, up to $2,500 using promo code JOIN125. That promo code activates those bonuses, and to sign up for BetUS, just use the link down in the description box below. It helps out the channel, and it's a great way to get in on NBA playoff action. Thank you to BetUS. Now, back to the video. Thank you, sponsored Tori. Let's take a look at defensive shooting numbers for the Portland Trail Blazers. They gave up the worst percentage at the rim in the entire league. When you can't make a shot from anywhere and you let your opponents make a bunch of shots at the rim, and you also let them shoot a lot there, in terms of preventing shots at the rim, the Blazers were bottom 10. And it's part of the reason why the Blazers fouled so much. They really struggled protecting the rim, and that was with DeAndre Ayton playing most of the season. He didn't really provide much resistance there. I feel like his defense maybe is a little bit overrated. Mid-range shooting percentage, teams hit a bunch of mid-range shots against the Blazers. The one thing they did well defensively, though, three-point percentage, 35.1%. The problem with this is it's kind of variable year to year for a lot of teams, and I'm not sure if the Blazers can sustain it going into next year. Basically, their defensive game plan was to run teams off the three-point line and force them downhill, and they feasted downhill. So if there's a way to maintain that number while protecting the rim a little bit better, not letting teams get to the rim as much, then you can start talking about this defense being okay. Part of why that rim finishing number is so high is the Blazers really let teams get out and run. They tied for second at the rate in which teams ran against them in transition, and were tied for second in points per possession scored against them in transition. Transition defense is the biggest flaw for this team's defense, and it's the number one thing that needs to improve going into next year. And it didn't really make sense for the Blazers to be so poor in transition given the amount of athletes and young guys they have. And the biggest thing that you could maybe attribute an effort issue to is just that. Guys jogging back, guys not sprinting back, etc. Now, the Blazers did crash the offensive glass really hard this year, and the alternative is when you're not getting those offensive rebounds, you don't have as much help back in transition, so teams are going to be able to run on you. But I don't like using that as an excuse, as the Knicks were the number one offensive rebounding team, and they didn't have anywhere near the problems that the Portland Trail Blazers did defending in transition. Now, let's take a look at some miscellaneous stats, and this first one, man... This first one might be the stat that I have the biggest problem with, and that is assist percentage. What assist percentage is the percent of made field goals that were assisted upon. This isn't raw assist numbers. This isn't based on how well guys shot the ball. This is based on the amount of shots that were made that were assisted. The Blazers had the highest percentage of unassisted field goals, which means they had the lowest percentage of assisted field goals in the league. And going into media day, there's a lot of talk about how they were basically going to be able to play like a team now. Chauncey has always preached ball movement and player movement and being able to play off each other offensively, and he's never been able to enact it. And there's absolutely no excuse for it because the number one team in assist percentage this year by far was the San Antonio Spurs, who won one more game than the Blazers. The second ranked team was the Toronto Raptors, who won 4 more games than the Blazers. Both those teams were taken at the end of the year. And both those teams pass the ball. Both those teams play off each other. The Blazers don't do that. They've been very ISO heavy. And it was funny because Damian Lillard got blamed in the past for how ISO heavy they were. You know, oh, they just run it through Dame. And Dame dominates the ball. And, you know, he plays a lot of one-on-one, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's funny how he's gone and the Blazers rank dead last in assist percentage. I just don't think Chauncey Billups is capable of getting the Blazers to actually move the ball too well. Last year, the Blazers ranked 18th in this regard. They ranked 18th. So a ton of regression in terms of just the ball movement in general. Now, some of this is, you know, you don't have anybody to collapse defenses at the rate that Dame did and kick out to shooters. You don't have as much shooting. Like, there is some things that factor in here for the Blazers' decline, but man, they were way too stagnant this year, spamming stuff like Jeremy Grant post-ups and Ant had to play too much iso ball. I don't think this is an Ant issue necessarily. I think it's just more so the Blazers' offensive structure is a mess. It's a joke, and that's why they were dead last in assist percentage. Free throw percentage, the Blazers ranked top 10 in an offensive category, which is great. They had the 9th best free throw percentage at 79.1%. The Blazers had the 11th highest steal percentage. That contributed to how they were able to turn teams over, but they didn't block shots at all. They ranked 27th in blocked shot percentage. Blazers opponents had the highest steal percentage against them. The Blazers, of course, had a bunch of turnover issues. And then also, this is what I expected. The Blazers had a ton of shots blocked, 3rd highest rate in the league, and that's partly why they struggled finishing at the rim, in my opinion. They were just getting stonewalled. A lot of youth that doesn't really understand how to get shots off on the inside without getting blocked by rim protectors. Ryan Rupert struggled with that when he played and drove. Scoot Henderson got a lot of shots blocked. The Blazers just got rejected at the rim time and time again, and it was a major, major issue for them. I think they need to get better at making the kick-out pass, but they need more shooting on the perimeter to kick out too. And those were defensive analytics for the Blazers this season. And roster construction going forward should try and address those issues. The Blazers need more shooting that can space the floor, making the paint less packed, making it easier for guys to drive the lane and get shots off at the rim and not get blocked. There's a lot of things that go into these analytics, and there's a lot of reasons why they were what they were. And obviously the Blazers just got to fix a lot of things. And if it's not through roster construction going forward by bringing in guys that can help that, maybe drafting a shooter with that Warriors pick like a Dalton Connect would be cool, then obviously development, fixing some of these issues with the young players they already have will be paramount for this team actually improving. Anyway, let me know what you think of any of these analytics down in the comment section below. I'm Matt here. I'll catch you next time. Until then, as always, peace out. Go Blazers.